Hello, everyone. It's Renee Baribeau, the Practical Shaman, and welcome to another year, 2025, of the Shaman's Cave.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sandra Ingerman, and I'm excited to welcome everybody back to the Shaman's Cave, but also into a new year of 2025.
Which is a year of nine. And, that's a year of the hermit. So my guess is we'll either be leading the way into a new paradigm or we'll be walking solo, depending on how you view the hermit. But I happen to be nine, so 999 this year again will be very interesting. Maybe I'll be leading the way with my Windwalker Oracle with the lamp showing. I'm not sure. But today, Sandra, why don't you tell everyone about our topic and how we got here?
Yeah, well, first of all, I wanted to say all these years I've known you, I had no idea that you were a nine in the tarot, because that is a brilliant archetype to have. So it shows a real gift of being a way shower and also all the tools that you do with writing and speaking. That's all part of the brilliance of the hermit. And it actually leads really well into our topic today. And so when Renee and I came back to do our shows after we took a bit of a break, we found that the last show that we did was more of a conversation than a linear lecture. Because although this is a podcast, I never really wanted it to be two talking heads. And in some ways, we've done a brilliant show, but we both have our little squares, and Renee shares her wisdom, I share my wisdom, and we say goodbye to everybody and hope that you got something from the show. But there's another way of working, and I worked like this with Lynn Roberts when we wrote Speaking with Nature, and also when we wrote Walking Through Darkness. If any of you read Walking Through Darkness, there is no way to follow it linearly. You'd actually lose your mind. It would make no sense to you. And so in the old days, how women used to share wisdom was through what is called circular storytelling. This is the old way. This is the old indigenous way. Nobody just told stories. They were all circular. What that means is you couldn't follow the story to get the wisdom in a linear way. You had to engage your right brain, and you had to engage your heart, and you had to engage your soul. And what are these metaphors sharing? And what do they mean to me? And what's the wisdom behind the words? And so this is the way women shared wisdom forever. And so Renee and I realized after the last show that we were doing circular storytelling. And we love it because it was never our vision to be two talking heads. And it was never my vision to have people looking in my eyes all the time on a podcast. And so I'm not only into circular storytelling, but I'm clairaudient. And so I am not into the visual. And I really enjoy having a podcast that's audio. And Renee agreed to jump in with me on that. And so we're going back to the old women's ways. That's what we're doing. And there's such wisdom in it. And there's so much that we get to learn from it. And I hope that we can be role models for you so that you go out and start talking in circular storytelling where people go, what? But if you drop in, you realize, wow, that was really beautiful. I learned a lot through learning about the metaphors of life.
That's really apropos. And what most of you really don't know is that last time you got to hear the 17 minutes of our banter back and forth. But trust me, we get on the phone about an hour before we hit the record button. And we just go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And we've always thought for many years, oh, wouldn't that be great if we recorded the pre-recordings of what before we even say. But I remember when many years ago, I was, like 30 years ago, when I started going to an Anipi circle. And I had my teacher was from the Rosebud Reservation. And here I was, this Wichicho, a white girl, who wanted to learn it all. And she'd say, yeah, let's just sit here in the living room for an hour before we go out to the fire. And then it would be like, okay, now we're going to build the fire and watch the fire for an hour. Now put the blankets on there a certain way. And I'd be like, every week, it would be like, well, when are you going to tell me the secrets?
Yeah.
When are you going to tell me, how to travel out of the lodge, time travel? She always, and then when you'd ask those questions, she'd start to sing. And it would be like, you never did get a straight answer. And many, many years later, I understand the lessons.
Right. I know, it's amazing. I really miss, both of my grandmothers died when I was 4, but a lot of people who are listening had grandmothers and aunts and maybe grandfathers and uncles who rocked them in rocking chairs and told circular stories. Stories you thought that they were stories, just stories. But then as you started to grow up, you realized, wow, my relative was actually giving me seeds of wisdom that planted really deep inside my inner landscape and grew. And it wasn't even a conscious process. It wasn't like, sit down and let me tell you the lessons of life. It was through storytelling. And those seeds of stories, they go so deep because they bypass the conscious mind and they go into the unconscious. And unless we're actually speaking to the unconscious, if we're just speaking to the conscious mind, then we're just adding to the racing thoughts that are going on in the planet right now.
Absolutely. And so our goal is we're finding our way into this new podcast where it's not a visual and it's a conversation. And so my suspect is that we'll be testing it out and finding, what works for you and what works for us. And that we would like to tell more stories. We would like to share more of our experience as a conversation than an isolated example, because those are the things that transcend our relationship as well as the relationship that we have to the podcast.
Yeah, and also it shows a level of trust about Renee and I, because we have an amazing amount of life experience, and we have an amazing amount of experience teaching shamanic work. And when you tell us what you want, instead of letting us share our years and years and years of what we've learned, we're just going to stay on a very surface level.
Mm-hmm.
I can't go deep with what the topics that are sent in. I can't. You don't trust me. You have to trust me to trust to know what people need to hear right now. what our spirits are talking about that people need to hear right now. I'm not really looking for what you're looking for. Basically, I'm just bringing through the spirits. That's
Mm.
what work is about.
And I love that.
Yeah, and so that was the original idea of the Shaman's Cave, of bringing a spiritual show um, onto a podcast and onto YouTube or whatever form that you watch this. But it's about listening to spirit and opening up and trusting and opening up your heart. And the Shaman's Cave is a feminine heart show. It's not a masculine mental show. And
Mhm.
so it's an interesting thing for us to think about of how do our hearts learn from stories, or do our hearts learn from words? Um, what's the energy that we need to all emanate so that we're speaking from our hearts and we're listening from our hearts? Because you really have to ask yourself the question, how well has your mind been getting you through life right now?
That's so true. And the other piece was, I think you and I were talking about some of our upcoming classes, my new Oracle deck and my new book. And people were really kind of testy about this on YouTube. Like, yeah, it was all an infomercial for the first 17 minutes. And let's talk about that from a heart-centered place as well. It's like we have what, 17,000 fans on YouTube. Well, it's in our heart that each of the 17,000 of you would buy my new book, A Pilgrim's Guide to Walking Wisdom, or buy the new Oracle deck, or Sandra's, her book, the Book of Ceremony, or, her recent book. But when we ask that that's our heart thing, oh, I need a favor, I would like you to review my book, or I'd like you to listen to my book. It takes a lot of wisdom to sit down and write a book, and a lot of courage to sit down and write a book. And I don't believe, I say to my friend all the time, like, what is wrong with me that I want to sit down and write a book? Like, it's not like how to get rich quick. It's about how to impart wisdom that we really believe is really important, that we trudge the happy road of our own initiations in order to get that way, to be able to transcend that information in a usable form for other people. And so if we want to talk about that it's because we come from a place of humility and a place of, I've earned the right to teach this or to share this wisdom. And, I really hope that you feel that from my heart to your heart and buy the book.
Yeah, and Renee, when I listen to you, um, I really hear asking our community to drop into compassion also, of understanding. It was really interesting to me when I shared my experience, not on the podcast, but in the world. This was really interesting to me. And some of you actually won't believe this. I have a disorder. It's one of the reasons we're on audio. And I wrote the Book of Ceremony. My disorder was really bad at that time, but I was so passionate about this material. I wrote the entire Book of Ceremony with one index finger, the entire book. And you know what? When I told people that, nobody said a word to me. Not, you did what? They just changed the conversation. And so it's really interesting. It's not only our capacity of our desires, of what we want from other people, but it's the projections that we put on teachers and writers too, and other people who do podcasts. Oftentimes it's forgotten that we're human.
Mhm.
And so there are so many podcasts out there where people are changing the formats of podcasts so that they can continue to share their wisdom, but it's not done in the way that every podcast is done. People are being creative right now. There's so many podcasts. People are being creative right now. And Renee and I are just two creative beings who don't want to get stuck in a rut. So
Right.
the point of all of this is, oh my God, I love telling stories and
Mm.
workshops. That's one of the reasons I like in-person teaching versus online. Online, everything is so fast. Get the information out, get the information out. But in my in-person workshops, I teach through telling stories. So that's me. That's Sandra Ingerman. I'm a woman. I teach the feminine way of being in the world. And oh my God, one of the shows we're going to do later is how can women stand together more to support each other instead of writing weird comments on YouTube.
You know, I think the more that I've gotten into uh, as a writer, all right, just as a writer, when I first wrote my first book called The Shamans Chef, How Cooking Saved My Life, it was a garbage dump. I was really honored about a week ago when, one of my closest people who's known me for over 30 years said, I love the stories you're telling in your new book. You should write more books and tell more stories because that's what feeds me. And, I think it's David White, the poet, who says people are hungry for loaves and fishes. You know, the age of information has got us nowhere. We're trapped in the age of information as opposed to walking in the desert or hearing a story. People remember your stories.
I actually got the same criticism with a lot of my books from my students who took workshops from me. They said, Sandra, you're so funny. We just sit and laugh. I mean, we have to take so many pee breaks in my workshops because we just laugh so much. And they criticized me because I didn't put that energy into my books.
Ah,
And they missed that. They missed the story part, the storytelling part, because that was how they learned. So I also got that feedback from my students of why did you stop telling stories in your books? And it's just a real feminine way of teaching. And it would be really interesting for you to try it. It would be really interesting to do an exercise where you write out a teaching that you would like to share and write it out literally, and then try to make a story out of it where it's all done through metaphor. Take your literal words and turn them all into metaphor. And notice the difference of the energy that flows through those words. Notice if you feel a power coming through those words. Notice if you feel a force coming through those words beyond what you wrote on a literal linear level. I promise you, if you try this exercise, you'll be amazed at the depth of how many layers a few sentences took on through circular writing versus the surface of what you get through the literal writing. It would be an incredible exercise. I mean, writing, speaking in nature and speaking with nature and walking through darkness, being able to write just through a feminine storytelling way. my soul sang throughout the whole entire writing. Not my mind, my soul and my heart just sang, and people pick it up and they read the books.
Maybe we could put some stories into our podcast this year where we'll actually find some stories to read and share, and or not even to read and share, but our minds, we might need to read and share.
Yeah.
But we're doing a layup here. Like if you're playing basketball, we're doing a layup here about some of the new directions that we're going to go into, because if we were in the same place as we were 7 years ago, we'd get bored with each other. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? We'd have nothing more to talk about, but we really like each other, and we really look forward to having more conversations. And we hope that, you can open your hearts and your minds a little bit to acquiesce to our stories and to our promotions. I mean, a lot of podcasts, they'll just put commercials right in there. We don't do that, but we do want you to take our courses. Sandra's got a new course starting this week on death and dying. I have a new book coming out on February 5th. The Wind Oracle is sold out, but it's coming back around. And so we're looking for you to support us to support you.
Exactly. And I am teaching a workshop on death as a shamanic rite of passage through the Shift Network. And you could visit sandraingerman.com or the shiftnetwork.com in order to find out more about that workshop coming up. It's going to be a beautiful 7 weeks on how we can work using shamanic methods with the general public to help people die in a very graceful fashion. And what does death mean to us? It's a course I've been teaching for over 40 years now, and it's a beautiful, beautiful course. And I love the idea of bringing in stories, and we really do want to support the community. And it's really important to understand, those of you who are out there and watching what's happening in the spiritual community right now, as we enter 2025, teachers and practitioners are all finding new ways that they want to come out and share right now, because we're moving into a time that's very different. It's times that remind me of younger times in my own life, when the planet was in complete chaos. But in order to meet what we're facing environmentally and just on every level in 2025, everything has to change. Everything has to change. And so how you learn has to change, how people teach has to change, how we communicate has to change, how we connect has to change. Otherwise, we just keep looping the same old pattern over and over and over again, which leads to nowhere.
Well, I'm going to give you an ending thought on that. So the other day, I did a New Year's spread with the Windwalker's Oracle, and the card that I got for the year, the directional card that we're in, this was the collective card, was the doldrums, the stillness. And one of the things people think, oh, there's no wind blowing in the doldrums, and the actual doldrums is down near the equator. It's actual direction. And the trick is in the doldrums is when the sailors were in this place with no wind, what they would have to do is they'd be on their boats. And remember, they didn't have motors back then. It was sails. What they would have to do was they would have to start offloading everything that didn't serve them or that they couldn't keep alive. Like they would throw the cattle overboard and the horses overboard because they couldn't feed the horses. And they knew they could be there for weeks on end. So imagine if you were going to be still in the water for this part of this year, what is it in your life that you might need to offload in order to be more at peace when you're not moving forward?
That is a perfect way to end our show. Thank you.
And it's a story.
That was deep, deep wisdom that's going to carry me through a very long time.
Well, we love being with you, and we will see you soon. And follow us in all the places, and think about maybe this would be a great week to buy one of our books.
Blessings, everyone, and welcome into 2025. I think we're going to have some incredible opportunities in the doldrums to learn really, really some amazing things. So I'm actually really looking forward to 2025.
Me too.